Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. So it looks like Derek and Tessa are going to have to work together, and looks like the prince kind of made that a final decision. So let's get started. The only thing I ask is that if you feel so inclined, like, share, and subscribe because it helps my channel. So let's move on to chapter 10. Here we go. Chapter 10. The door revealed a dark staircase that led to the servants' quarters. At the bottom was another hallway. A musty odor infused the air, and water-stained floorboards peeked out from below the edges of a threadbare carpet. As the temperature plunged further, the symbol on my palm started to glow. Why had Ella led me here? My palm pulsed with heat, luring me to wrap my finger around the knob of a partly closed door. Heavy eyelids left me feeling like I'd been drugged. When they closed fully, I saw Ella huddled in a corner in front of the stone fireplace, packets of letters at her feet. She pored over them, tears coursing down her cheeks, before moving to a thin mattress and sobbing herself to sleep. The vision faded. I entered the room, and the chill followed me inside. There was the fireplace where Ella had read the letters. A frayed mattress rested on a bed frame in the corner, and a small nightstand had been pushed against the wall. I knelt by the grate, noticing a footprint in a thin layer of soot, and sifted through the charred pile of ash. A few pieces of paper hadn't burned all the way through, so I pulled them from the ruin. Edges crumbled in my hand, but I was able to make out some words. Dear Miss Lockwood, I regret to inform you that we've done all we can to determine the cause of your father's illness. We recommend that you make him comfortable in his final days. There were only a few visible sentences on the letter. My dearest Ella, how your father has missed you. I know these last few months have been difficult, but give them a chance. You'll grow to love each other as I've grown to love your stepmother, Olivia. Treat them well while I'm away. Whatever else the letter contained was now lost. Ella likely had a rough transition into her new family. Having her father die so soon after she remarried must have been devastating. I knew how easy it was to feel alone when surrounded by other people. Seeing the room with fresh eyes, I imagined Ella sleeping on the mattress, isolated from the rest of her family. Why was Olivia showing Derrick to a room that wasn't hers? I placed the charred remains on the stone hearth and walked towards the nightstand. The drawer held a worn novel and a fresh apron. Between the fabric folds was a bronze padlock and a key. I frowned, holding the weight of it in my hand. The bedroom door had a metal latch 3/4 of the way up. Was Ella barring her room at night? And if so, from whom? An odd bundle protruded from under the thin comforter on the bed, resembling a wad of clothes. Maybe it was more of Ella's letters. I reached towards the mound. "What are you doing down here?" Derek's voice boomed from the doorway, making me jump. The thud of his boots echoed on the floor. At the time, a loud hiss filled the room. I knew instantly what had made that sound. All of a sudden, I'm sorry, of all the rotten luck, a cat. The blanket fell away. The sharp claws sank into my outstretched hand. I yelped, spinning away from the attacking beast. Derek wasn't so lucky. The black cat leaped from the bed, mewing. Is it mewling? Mewling and hissing, sorry. Mewling and hissing as it darted between his legs. He tried to get out of his way, but lost his balance and crashed onto me. We fell, tangled together, landing hard against the mattress. He caught himself with his hands, our faces inches apart. "We need to stop meeting like this, Detective." My gaze was drawn to his mouth, and a rush of heat spread through my body. His lips moved, and it seemed to take ages for the sound to reach my ears. What did I tell you about rule number one? He caught me staring, so I flicked my gaze back up to him. Derek's eyes darkened, tension coiling through his arms. More heat pulled through my limbs. I licked my dry lips and shifted beneath him. The movement evoked a low groan in the back of his throat. My breath caught. I wanted nothing more than to hear that sound again. You'd better write down the rules if you expect me to remember them all. Rule number one, his voice dripped an octave deeper, sending a shiver through my spine. It's dangerous to investigate alone. You're right. I could have been killed by the cat. So dangerous. He lifted his weight and instantly regretted my sarcastic remark. Reaching for my hand, Derek examined the scratch. A tiny rivulet of blood seeped from the edges. I sucked in a breath as he ran a feather-light touch along the broken skin. Cats hate me. I know that goes against logic. They're supposed to be a witch's best friend, but everyone I encounter wants to dig its claws into me. You should see my neighbor's cat. I've tried everything. Leaving it fish, scratching behind his ears. I even tried casting a spell that only made him mad. His eternal goal is to hiss at my grave. Derek sat up, taking me with him. I'll have him arrested. A bit. I bit my cheek to contain a laugh. You better be serious. It may be him or me one day. Don't make me promise you don't intend to keep. Don't make me a promise you don't intend to keep. Sorry. A beat of silence passed. His gaze mimicked what mine had done, dropping to my lips. The air seemed thin, and my lungs burned when his hands brushed against my waist. Barely conscious of my actions, I leaned closer, my eyes drifting closed. Oh, girl, you need to calm down. Immediately, Derek pulled back, his expression switching to a mask of indifference. I nearly punched the mattress until I saw the tick in his jaw, signaling he wasn't as unaffected as he tried to be. I never make promises. Rule number four. The whiplash of his emotions washed over me, and I crossed the room, taking a deep breath to calm my pounding heart. Well, while you were upstairs following me around Mrs. Lockwood and her clingy daughter, I stumbled across something. The bed creaked as Derek rose to his feet. His tone was all business again. What did you find? I pointed to the fireplace and the remnants of Ella's letter. Whatever they showed you upstairs, I wouldn't believe it. I think this was Ella's room, and I don't think she was happy here. She might have even been afraid. Olivia Lockwood toyed with the sleeve of her morning gown. It's true, Ella wasn't happy before her death. Her father contracted an illness after he returned from his last trip. It was a long, debilitating ailment that eventually claimed his life. We consulted with specialists, hoping to find a cure, but we were unsuccessful. After Maxwell's death, we tried to help Ella cope, but she completely shut down and refused to sleep in the main part of the house. I studied Ella's stepmother from my seat near the window. Her red-rimmed eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Helen sat beside her mother's elbow on the plush sofa, and Derek remained standing, notebook in hand. Do you know anything about the padlock I found in her drawer? Was there a reason she might need it? I asked. Olivia wrinkled her brow. I didn't realize she had one. This is a safe neighborhood, and we've never had any trouble with the staff. I can only assume the lock was already in the room before she started using it. Derek tapped his pen against the page. After Sir Lockwood's death, how was the relationship between the three of you? Strained at best. It's ironic now that I think about it, but I assume The prince's ball would bring us together. Olivia smiled wistfully. It was something to look forward to after so many months of sickness and mourning. But Ella refused to go. Did either of you speak with her at the ball? No. Olivia pressed her handkerchief to her trembling lips. We didn't know she was there until we saw her dancing with the prince. We lost her in the crowd, and a short while later she was found in the courtyard. It was chaos. Everyone was terrified, pointing fingers. We were as shocked as anyone. Derek closed his notebook and placed it in his jacket pocket. Thank you for your time, ladies. If we have any other questions, we'll be in touch. Mrs. Lockwood inclined her head as I passed by the sofa, but Helen wouldn't meet my gaze. There was something about her that seemed off. A memory of shaking Ella's hand made me pause. That's a lovely emerald ring, Helen. May I see it? Helen pressed her lips together and lifted her hand, extending her fingers. I bent closer to touch her palm, faking interest in the ring. Her skin was smooth and callus-free, a stark difference from Ella's hard-working hands. Turning her palm up, I noticed a 2-inch gash starting at the base of her thumb and running to her wrist. Uh-oh. That looks painful. How did you get it? Helen laughed and tried to tug her hand from my grasp. I'm such a ninny. I was pruning flowers in the garden without wearing gloves, and the shears slipped. Olivia patted her daughter's knee. Helen has a green thumb. There's a small garden shed around back. You can go see it if you'd like. Helen smirked and indicated the scratch where the Lockwood cat had sunk its claws. That's a nasty gash you have yourself, Miss Daniels. You should put something on it, or it might fester. Infections can be deadly. The way Helen eyed my wound spoke volumes. It was as it if it was up to her, I'd lose the hand. Derek thanked them again and led me out of the house. He stood in the drive, shaking his head. What was that about? Did you see the injury on her hand? It's suspicious, isn't it? And her skin was so smooth. Ella's wasn't. I thought Ella was a maid, not the daughter of a wealthy family. You should have seen the rags she had on. It doesn't add up. I chewed on the edge of my thumbnail. Derek crossed his arms and gave me an odd look. What? Why are you staring at me like that? Like I have two heads. It's surprising. What is? You. He took my good hand and walked off the path towards the side of the house. An overgrown trail of tangled vines and branches made it difficult to go any further, but from where we stood I could see the roof of a small garden shed. Derek gestured down the path. Go on, this is your lead. I'll let you have the honor of investigating it. He had to be kidding. I took a cautious step back, and my foot sank into a pile of dry leaves. What's the matter? Where's the intrepid witch determined to drive in and solve the case? I thought you wanted those vines removed. He was baiting me, the wretch. I eyed the untamed foliage on the neglected path. It couldn't hurt me. There probably weren't any snakes in the overgrown grass. I swallowed. There better not be snakes. You know, it's not wise to taunt a witch. I stomped past him, taking a face full of vines and in the process spitting out the brittle leaves. I jerked an arm to untangle the vines pulling my hair. Derek chuckled under his breath. I considered letting a branch snap back into his face, but chose the high ground. For once. The path ended at the entrance to a squat, narrowing building. All I needed to find was a single rose bush, and I could shove the clue in his face. Honestly, why people thought being a detective was so hard was beyond me. I'd been doing it for less than a week and already had a prime suspect. Imagining Helen behind bars, unable to bat her lashes at Derek, played no part. Which is truth. I bet. I peered through the window pane, cupping my hands on either side of my head to block the light. Inside, chrysanthemums bloomed, and ferns sprouted from the ceramic pots. A pair of pruning shears rested on the table, but besides containers of potting soil and watering can, there wasn't much else. There wasn't any evidence of a rose bush, and none were planted in the adjacent garden. Deflated, I slumped against the wall. Aw. Find any murder weapons? Should I have Helen arrested for not watering the plants enough? I scowled. Rule number 3. Everyone and anyone is a suspect. You said so yourself. And that includes irritatingly perfect stepsisters. So, you do remember the rules. He plucked a stray leaf from my hair. It was a casual gesture, but it felt familiar, almost intimate. Just the one. You did well back there, I should tell you. My men searched the garden shed days ago, and we noted Helen's injury during her interview the night of the murder. But you asked the right questions. Were you testing me? Would it make you happy to know you passed? It would. Derek tried to hide a smile. Either way, thanks to your weird connection with the ghost, you discovered Ella slept in another wing of the house. The angle with her father is something I still have to delve into. I poked him in the chest. Something we have to delve into. All right, we. He caught my hand and rubbed a thumb over the dark symbol. I'm not saying I will start trusting in all of your mumbo jumbo. I think you might mean magic, detective? Sure, magic. He examined the symbols, tracing their outline. How does your link with Ella work? I'm not sure. This is the first time something like this has happened. The mark on my palm should have faded when the illusion did, but since she died while under my spell, we're connected. Before she appeared, I experienced strange occurrences, chilled rooms, voices. You heard voices? Not like that. So forget about carting me off to the asylum. But it is strange how I was able to see her moving through the past. Derek looked grim, his features cut from stone. They're only visions, right? They can't hurt you. I don't think so. It doesn't seem to be a physical connection. If that changes, this partnership is over. I nudged him in the shoulder. Is that what this is, detective? A partnership? He was still frowning, but some of the tension drained from his features. I don't know what this is, but like your connection with Ella, there's a first time for everything. I didn't bother to deny the pleasure of his words gave me. I had a partner, a reluctant one, but given time. So, what's next? Nothing. We're done for today. He left me leaning against the garage shed. I hurried after him, noticing he went in the opposite direction from the way we came, a direction that was vine and foliage free. My jaw clenched. He would have known this way was easier if he had his men search the shed. I had a feeling he was waiting for me to complain, but I would not give him the satisfaction. He slowed so I could catch up. I'll be at the magic shop tomorrow afternoon. Be ready by 6. We have an interview at the palace. I nearly tripped over my feet. Seriously? You're taking me to the castle? I picked a twig from my skirt and noticed a dark stain near the hemline. What should I wear? Tessa, we're going to visit a crime scene. Wear whatever. He waved his hand dismissively. Excuse me. Wear whatever. Derek sighed. You look fine. My mouth dropped open at the lackluster praise. Fine? Everything is fine to you, isn't it? Meat pies, a woman's appearance. They're the same thing. How charming. Hold on while I swoon from your compliments. Wait, no, it went away. He turned so fast I collided with his chest, clamping his hands around my forearms and tugging me closer. He dipped his head and spoke low in my ear. Uh-oh. Trust me, Tessa. You'll know when I'm being charming. Oh, hello. I gave him a mock pout and patted his cheek. I don't think so, Derek, but good try. Take me home. I need to pick out an outfit. Oh my. Chapter 11. Nice dress. Abrams gave me an encouraging smile from across the carriage. I surveyed my carefully selected royal blue tunic with its snug waist, custom leather belt, and fur trim sleeves. Yeah, it's fine, I guess. I apologize again for showing up late. I know Detective Chambers was planning on picking you up at 6. There was a situation at the agency. He'll meet us at the castle. Situation, huh? I refused to analyze my disappointment. It didn't matter to me that Derrick had sent his rookie officer in his place. Not one bit. Hand on a spell book and strike me down if I'm lying. I coughed and darted a look at the cloudless sky. The castle came into view, distracting me from further tempting the fates. Nestled among slope hills and manicured gardens, the palace was the jewel of the kingdom. The setting sun bathed the bleached stone towers and ornate spires on an orange glow. On both sides of the winding drive stood giant topiaries, sculptured into spirals. Lantern posts were spaced between them, already lit, illuminating the cobblestones. We came to a halt in front of a grand staircase. It was easy to imagine the night of the ball, with carriages lined up around the bend and guests in their finest attire ascending the marble steps. If I closed my eyes, I could almost hear the strains of the kingdom's orchestra seeping through the ballroom windows. Smell of savory delights, the fruity wine, and the expensive perfumes wafting through the air. This is the balloon, the, sorry, this is the ballroom entrance. It's closest to the courtyard. Abrams gestured for me to follow him down a long hallway lined with gold-framed paintings and elaborate wall sconces. My shoes clicked over the polished marble, the sound echoing into the vaulted ceilings. The crime scene has been guarded around the clock the night of the murder. We collected evidence, but the royal family wanted the area preserved. You'll be doing a fine walkthrough before Detective Chambers releases the scene. We came to a set of doors that opened into the courtyard. Abrams stopped to talk to a guard, while I stepped onto the cobble path that led away from the castle. An eerie silence descended. It felt like hollowed ground. My shoes sank into the thick grass as I weaved through the rose bushes and marble statues. Even the fountain in the distance remained silent, its waters tranquil and unmoving. I walked towards the fountain. It was much larger than I expected, more of a circular waiting pool. In the center was a tiered statue, where streams trickled and poured into the basin. The water was dark, maybe 3 or 4 feet deep, surrounded by a stone barrier. I noticed a single rose petal floating on the surface and watched it ebb and flow almost in a trance. When my fingers brushed over the stone boundary, I felt a jolt through my hand. The symbol on my palm pulsated, and a familiar wave of dizziness crashed through me. Not again. Around me, the courtyard faded. I squinted against the gloom. What was happening? With the murky water covering my face and body, the only light came from the ripple of the moon penetrating the water surface. A weight pressed on my shoulders. Powerful hands held me under as air bubbles escaped my lips. Replaced by the tang of icy water, I watched the bubbles rise, helpless to follow. Can't breathe. It hurts. My lungs burned like fire inside my chest. Frantic, I splayed my fingers along the silty bottom, looking for leverage. Pebbles scraped my palms, and weeds slithered against my skin. The last breath in my body withered away. I struggled beneath the firm grip, choking, desperate to reach the surface. Panic surged. I inhaled water instead of air. The thrashing stilled along with my movements. My eyes were open to the pale moonlight that grew darker and darker. The weight was gone, but I remained at the bottom, looking up. Forever. No! I fell to my knees on the grass, gulping in rapid bursts of air. The courtyard came back into focus, and I tried to calm my pounding heart, its rhythmic thump echoing in my ears. What a horrible vision! It had felt so real. The pain in my palm faded, and I braced myself against the fountain to stand. Had I just witnessed Ella's final moments? Abrams was still talking to the guard, oblivious to my turmoil. I sat on the stone wall and closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, soothing breaths of air. This simple vision thing was starting to get ridiculous. Vivian had never mentioned experience of ghost memories. A rustling jolted my eyes open. It was coming from a tall hedge that lined the courtyard. A stick cracked under a boot. Someone was positioned on the other side. I inched closer and bent to look through a small opening in the hedge, finding a pair of ink-colored eyes staring back. The man had an angular face and sharp nose, a curl of sandy brown hair covering his left brow. He watched me for an airless moment, then lifted a gloved finger to his lips. "I'll find you," he rasped before vanishing from the opening. I ran the length of the hedge, rounded the corner. The man was gone. The trees and shrubs formed a dense cover, and the fading light created pockets of darkness, a perfect setting to hide his escape. Searching the foliage for any sign of movement, his words echoed in my ears. "I'll find you." Not the moment comforting phrase from a stranger loitering around the crime scene. "Tessa?" The deep and flinting sound of my name broke through my thoughts. I almost ducked behind the hedge. Derrick didn't sound pleased, and he'd be less so if he caught me wandering on my own for a second time. Damn him and his stupid rules. He called my name again, and this time I heard the hint of alarm. I remembered the look of concern in his eyes when he asked about my visions. That look had unnerved me in ways I didn't want to identify. I'd have to tread lightly, telling him about my vivid death hallucinations and a suspicious man threat to find me was bound to get him sidelined and thrown back on was bound to get me sidelined and thrown back on boring interview duties. "I'm over here," I shouted, stepping from behind the hedge. Derek strode across the courtyard, his features morphing between anger and relief, as erratic as a child plucking petals. He loves me not. Unfortunately, he ended on not, halting with a deep frown. "Were you looking for me, detective?" I injected extra sweetness in my tone. He didn't buy it. In fact, it only made him grouchier. His arms crossed like steel bands across his chest, and I dropped the act fast to point to the hedge. There was a man peeking through the branches. I tried to get a closer look, but he disappeared. What was he wearing? Derek's hard gaze left mine and searched the grounds. It was difficult to tell. I could only see a portion of his face. He appeared to be late 20s, early 30s, and fast. He didn't want to be followed. I was probably a servant who ran it was probably a servant who ran off when I caught him snooping. A rush of guilt tightened my insides. I knew I shouldn't keep the strange man's words a secret, but there was too much at stake, and I couldn't risk telling Derek the truth. He gave up his search. It's possible. The king ordered the crime scene off limits. I'm sure curiosity is rampant. Come with me. There's a witness I want you to meet. He ushered me past the fountain and down the stone walkway. "Has the fountain been dredged?" I asked, remembering Ella's desperate thrashing beneath the surface. "It has. There was nothing of consequences, though we did find a thin strip of leather in the grass. It could be unrelated. There's no telling how long it's been there, but we've collected it as evidence along with the wine stem." Wine stem? He steered me around a marble bench, where I noticed the faint glitter of glass shards. A few more were scattered across the tile, and one glinted beneath the giant rose bush. We found the wine stem here. Derek pointed to the base of the bench. It had shattered on the walkway, but a portion remained intact. I nodded, my attention focused on the rose bush. The roses aren't the same. The ones in your office are a different strain from the ones planted here. Good catch. You're right. The rose wasn't cut here. The palace plants a breed of tea rose, but the roses left by the killer appear to be an unknown strain. We haven't located the source. We kept moving, approaching an older gentleman wearing a scarlet jacket and charcoal gray pants. Gold buttons the size of coins gleamed down the front of his coat. He bent at the waist in a curt bow, revealing a balding spot on top of his head. Tessa, this is Bradford, the King's steward. He encountered Miss Lockwood shortly before midnight. That's correct, Detective. Bradford smoothed the puff of white hair near his ear. Miss Lockwood Miss Lockwood was acting strange, swaying a bit, and I saw her stumble. She was alone, carrying a glass of wine, so I attempted to offer assistance. Many of our guests had too much to drink that evening. She declined and said she needed some fresh air. So, she'd had a little too much to drink, I frowned in thought as the man went on. I helped her, though, through the crowd, but she stumbled again and spilled her wine on my jacket. She was so embarrassed she ran off before I could tell her it was all right. I lost sight of her in the crowd. A short time later she was found in the fountain. He paused. A somber look hardened his features. I was in charge of selecting the two vintages we served at the ball since my skills as a sommelier are unrivaled. In the rush of the moment, it didn't seem important, but given the tragic nature of Miss Lockwood's demise, I should tell you that when she spilled the wine on my jacket, it smelled off. Looking back, I believe it had been altered in some way. Hmm, good catch. Had Ella been poisoned? My mind raced with implications. It could explain her disorientation and also suggested the killer had premeditated the act. There's been so much upheaval in the palace, I didn't recall the discrepancy with the wine until yesterday, and unfortunately, my jacket has been cleaned. Bradford hung his head as if he had single-handedly lost the case. What about the wine stem? I asked Derek. You said you collected it as evidence. We did, but it was broken. There wasn't any wine left for a sample. Not to the naked eye, no. But to a witch? Shadows played over his handsome features when Derek lifted a brow. I grinned, suddenly feeling a rush of excitement. Fetch the wine stem, Detective. It's time I showed you just how much my mumbo-jumbo, as you call it, is worth. Ooh, I like that. Chapter 12. We're here, Derek murmured. I shifted deeper into the cushioned seat. 5 more minutes. My eyes felt grainy and heavy-lidded as I peeked beneath my lashes. I must have fallen asleep while waiting at the agency. The last thing I remembered was him running in to collect the wine stem. A sliver of moonlight poured through the window, splashing across his shoulder and the white sleeve of his shirt. Wasn't he wearing a jacket before? The weight of it registered in my mind. He draped it over me, and I currently had it pulled up to my chin, collar clutched tight in my fist. It smelled pleasant, so I inhaled deep breaths. Derek leaned forward, a moonlight revealing his features, and tugged the edge of his jacket over the exposed area of my arm. I know you're awake. I let out a slow breath. Good detective work. What gave me away? Years of training and a finely tuned sense of others. So modest and impressive, I drawled. You can't blame me. You were inside the agency for a long time. My superior wanted an update. I filled him in on the Bradford's account and mentioned we're looking into the possibility Ella was poisoned. I came back to get you, but you'd already fallen asleep. Maybe he did have a finely tuned sense of others. I felt completely drained. The coat sagged as I straightened in the seat. I offered it to him, but he gave a subtle shake of his hand. Keep it. It's cold. He opened the door, and a blast of night air confirmed the frigid temperature. I wrapped his coat tighter around my body and followed him out of the carriage. Inside the magic shop, I lit the lamp wick. The flames glowed over worn books and clay pots. Placing one of the lamps on the workbench, I swept aside sprigs of herbs and dried leaves, careful not to scatter them on the floor. The chill from outside made its way indoors, so Derek coaxed a fire to life. Soon, the burning logs snapped and crackled in waves of heat. Ooh, yeah, I can feel that heat. He held his palms over the flames and rubbed his fingers together, a small shiver shaking his shoulder. I glanced at his discarded coat and felt a twinge in my chest. He'd been cold on the ride over and hadn't said a word. You can put the wine stem on the table. I need to collect a few things before we get started. I slipped away before he could respond, hoping the unheated air from the supply room would clear my head. As usual, I was overreacting, latching on to acts of kindness and making them more than they were. So what if Derek had given me his coat? It was a gentlemanly thing to do, the bedrock of chivalry. And I'd already established he was an overachiever. It didn't make him special. Still, his gesture went Still, his gesture went to my head like champagne bubbles and made my stomach fizz. Better not get addicted. Too much champagne made a person ill. In the storeroom, I surveyed the shelves. The floor-to-ceiling nook was a shabby shrine to my mother. I tried to keep her organizational system. Remembered she spent hours cataloging the powders and the liquids and the recordings of their uses in thick ledgers at her feet. But over the years, my special brand of chaos had seeped around the edges, and now the catalog didn't match the inventory. My fingers grazed wistfully over the vials, searching for one in particular. I ducked beneath the bundle of herbs hanging from the ceiling. The bouquet swayed around my ears, filling my nose with soothing scent of lavender. Where is it? I whispered, standing on my toes. Dust left filthy smudges on my fingertips, and cobwebs created wispy barriers to the jar in the back. Plunging my hand through the sticky threads, I prayed its occupant was visiting a neighbor's web and felt around until I grasped a glass container with a raised symbol. Gotcha! I hesitated, jar in hand, listening for the sound in the other room. Left to my own devices, I'd discover secrets in Derek's office. Was he doing the same now? Sifting through my things and making judgment? His attitude during our first meeting still stung, and even though it seemed like he was coming around, I couldn't dismiss the hurt that had burrowed deep inside my chest. When I re-entered, I found him leaning against the workbench, arms casually folded over his chest and sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked relaxed, almost in his element. If he had searched, he'd done so quickly and had the wherewithal not to get caught. Smart man. Derek watched me cross the room, seeming to capture every nuance of my journey. I thought I'd find you snooping in my cupboards the moment I left you alone. He angled his face, and a look of dark hair fell over his eyes. He had no interest in searching my shop. Whatever secrets he might unearth, he'd discover them by studying me. Were you testing me? Perhaps, but I wasn't worried. Witches don't hide dead bodies in their cupboards. If I remember correctly, there weren't any in your basement either. That's because I only keep them there in emergencies. He gave a half smile at my answer. There was something in his tone, a hint of mischief, that made those champagne bubbles fizz in my stomach again. The candlelight flickered over his features, and I admired the hard lines of his jaw, the way his lips moved, and the low rumble of his voice. What was wrong with me? Girl, I don't know, but you got it bad. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, dripping my gaze to my feet, I mentally cursed. It wasn't every day, or any day at all, that a tall, dark, and handsome detective occupied my shop. But this was no excuse to go all the way swoony. Derek's fondness for doing, Derek's fondness for doling out finds was partly responsible for the mess I was in, and here I was letting myself be charmed by him. Maybe some things were inevitable. Right, yeah. The only thing inevitable was my debt coming due at the end of the month. I placed the jar onto the table and pulled out the stopper. A spoonful of powder went into a clay pot, followed by a cup of herb lace tonic and a sprinkle of black salt. The liquid bubbled and frothed, emitting a fragrant steam. Derek read the label on the jar. Rosenfin. I've never heard of it. Be careful with that. I plugged the stopper into the container and moved it out of reach. Rosenfin is used to detect poison. It's a little secret of mine. When I was younger, my mother never let me mix my own potions. Something about her not wanting me to blow the roof off the shop. So, like any good witch, I went behind her back. It sounds silly, but I wanted to prove to her that I could create something useful. He was silent for a moment, giving me that look again, the one that made me think he saw through all of my bravado and vulnerable witch beneath. That doesn't sound silly to me. Yeah, well, you didn't let me get to the part where I went a few months without eyebrows. He flattened his lips to keep from smiling, then wrinkled his brow. Why do you do that? Do what? Make jokes at your own expense whenever you talk about your magic. I fidgeted with the spoon handle and dropped my gaze. It saves someone else from having to make them, I guess. His inscrutable gaze returned, and I ducked my head, tugging the long strands of my hair to hide my flushed cheeks. There was a clog in my throat. I cleared it away. Anyways, the eyebrows grew back, and I eventually figured out the correct combination of ingredients. It worked by altering composition of the toxins. In their altered state, the mixture changes colors, which can then be used to determine the type of poison present. That's incredible. Was your mother impressed? No. At the time, I could only detect one type of poison, not a lethal one either. So it wasn't very impressive. It took much longer to compile and test for other types. Years, in fact. She was gone by then. He nodded, and his hands brushed lightly against my shoulder, hovering there for a second before he closed his fist and dropped it to the side. Well, I'm impressed. It sounds like something that would be useful to the agency. Yeah, useful only in the right hands, meaning witches. Watch this. Placing my palms over the bowl, I channeled my magic and spoke the incantation. The mixture popped and then settled into a slow hiss. It was ready. Unfortunately, rosenfin is a deadly poison all on its own. Ingesting even a small amount can kill, which is why you should stay back. I hate to have to explain to your superior why there's a dead detective on my shop floor. He eyed the potion wearily. I don't know. That sounds an awful lot like an emergency. I'd end up in your basement. Only until I can bury you beneath the garden shed. I flashed him an innocent smile. He wasn't amused. So, you developed a poison to detect a poison. Is that wise? You tell me, detective. Don't you often have to think like a killer in order to catch one? That's different. How so? Derek's jaw clenched as he struggled to answer. You have to know what you're doing. Exactly. It boils down to experience. What is deadly in the wrong hand can be a solution in another's. But don't worry, you're safe with me. I'm too tired to dig a hole. His comical expression was worth risking that wraith. Sorry, his comical expression was worth risking his wrath. I stifled a grin and reached for an ox hair brush, then dipped the bristles into the filmy substance. He stilled my wrist. That isn't funny. This is dangerous, and I imagine highly illegal. I know. You could have me arrested. Now hand me the wine stem. Derek scowled as he removed the lid from the wooden box and placed the wine stem on the table. Be careful with that. I'd hate to have to explain to my superior why there's a dead witch on her shop floor. No, you wouldn't. He lifted my chin with his fingers until our eyes met. I would. The certainty in his tone wobbled the brush in my hand. Why did he have to stand so close? I could feel the heat of his from his touch like a brand. As if I'd spoken my thoughts out loud, he let go and stepped back. Feeling off balance, I brushed the bristles over the wine stem, leaving a milky white stain. Now we wait. How long? Patient, detective. Derek cast me a long-suffering look and flipped through a leather-bound volume of moon phase rituals. He moved on to a manual on fortune-telling. You certainly have a lot of interesting merchandise. Where do you find things like this? Specialty markets mostly. The charms and candles are all local. I mix my own potions, but some ingredients I have shipped from overseas. That's where I get the good stuff. But it's more expensive. He nodded absently, his gaze traveling over the shelf of crystals. Beneath it was a series of spells arranged side by side under a pane of glass. His brow quirked as he read the small brass plate affixed to the display. Beginner love spell. Make him yours before he sees the real you. Really, Tessa? Oh, I love her sense of humor. I leaned my elbow on the case and tapped the glass. Those are some of my best sellers. I bet. Do the love spells work? There haven't been any complaints. Why? Are you in the market? I teased. He leaned closer to read one of my scrolls. Let's see. This one looks good. The lightning love spell. Ingredients call for lemon zest, hemlock, a mirror shard, and a scorpion's tail. Mix with the lock of your target's hair, and it will send an enchanted bolt straight onto your lover's heart. He squinted at the fine print. Caution. May cause burning. Throwing back his head, his throaty laughter filled the quiet shop. I couldn't resist a smile. It was nice, more than nice. I'd finally cracked his cool exterior. Who knew what lay further underneath? When his amusement faded, I placed my hand on his arm. He went still beneath my touch. The heat from his skin warmed my palm. That's the first time I've heard you laugh. I like it. You should do it more often. A beat of silence passed while he looked at me, his expression haunted and tinged with a sense of loneliness. It was riveting, and I couldn't turn away from it. Didn't want to. In my line of work, there aren't many reasons to laugh. The room had grown unbearably warm. I closed what little distance remained between us, and his hands moved reflexively to my waist, gaze falling to my mouth. The action alone sent shivers of anticipation through my body. For the love of spellbooks, he was handsome. How tragic! His voice was rough. Do you think so? Very much. You might need more than you realize. The air thickened. My lips parted, and his fingers tightened against my hip. Maybe I do. Oh, good Lord. Sorry. Oh. I held a breath as he dipped to brush his mouth against mine in a tentative kiss. It was unhurried, a lingering taste that left me restless. Restless? Guess it's leaving me breathless too. A lingering taste that left me restless. Restless. I can't say that. I'm gonna start that part over. I held in a breath as he dipped to brush his mouth against mine in a tentative kiss. It was unhurried, a lingering taste that left me restless. His fingers moved over the back of my neck, drawing me closer, deeper. The scent of his skin, the slide of his lips, the low rumble in the back of his throat became my only focus when our bodies molded together. He didn't kiss like a straight-laced detective with an alphabetical taste. This mouth was pure abandon, leaving my senses in shambles. Good Lord. Y'all have to realize I have not read a romance book in so long. Oh, like, I want to say decades. I'm used to ancient books. uh, Books on how we, ascend and do magical tricks and not romance. I don't know if y'all needed to know that, but anyway, that's why I keep stumbling. Okay, the pressure of his lips softened, and Derek drew back, dragging the pad of his thumb across my bottom lip as he expelled a ragged breath. I shouldn't have done that. Probably not, I whispered. It was unprofessional. Highly. It won't happen again. I tilted my head to search his dark gaze, and what I saw there made my breath catch. His eyes told a truth his mouth didn't. Liar. Tessa. Another thought stole my attention. It's green. His features clouded with confusion when I moved out of his reach, heading towards the bookcase. I paused for a moment, regaining my composure before selecting a heavy, dust-covered volume, which I carried back to the workbench. The rosinfin worked. The paste on the wine stem turned green. Dirk stood behind me, so close I struggled to keep from leaning against him. The need was tantalizing, but I feigned interest in turning the page of the book. His arm brushed my side as he leaned closer, breath caressing my neck and making my nerve-ending tingle. Oops, I went too far. Back a page. Finally, I found the correct section. If it had been any further, I would have dumped the book at my feet and tried testing his vow to not kiss me again. Who needed professionalism? Derek read the title next to my finger. The poison is belladonna root. That makes sense. It says in case of poisoning, symptoms include blurred vision, loss of balance, and confusion. In large doses, it can cause delirium, slurred speech, and even result in death. The steward said Ella was disoriented. The killer could have poisoned her to weaken her defenses. There were hundreds of people at the ball. The killer would have needed to overpower her without drawing attention. So he poisoned her wine and either lured her out to the courtyard or waited until she stumbled out there on her own. I agree. What else does it say? I skipped to the next paragraph. Belladonna root is often used in wine to mask its bitter taste and unpleasant odor. That's probably why Bradford could smell it. Ella might not have noticed, but someone experienced with wine would have recognized the difference. If she hadn't spilled her wine, we might have never known it was poisoned. It's possible, but without the spell, it wouldn't have mattered. Nice work, Tessa. A flare of pleasure bloomed in my chest at the praise. Thank you, detective. There's a little bit more. It says in the right doses, belladonna root can be used as an aphrodisiac, increasing desire and stimulating. I trailed off, my cheeks flaming. When I turned my head, our eyes met, and again our lips were inches apart. My earlier accusation hung between us. Liar. Derek slipped the book from my fingers and placed it on the table without breaking my gaze. I think that's enough reading for tonight. I think you're right. He cleared his throat. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll go to the apothecary and make a list of anyone who grows or sells belladonna plants. Sounds like a plan. Good night, detective. He retrieved his coat and paused at the door. Good night, Tessa. The soft murmur stayed with me long after he slipped through the entrance and into the darkness. Girl. Okay. I am so sorry for all the flub ups, for all the blah blah blahs. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Again, I have not read a romance book in like decades, so it's catching me off guard. Uh, anyway, good writing. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know. You guys tell me. What about you guys? What do you guys feel? So, I will see you in a couple days. Bye.